start here in a couple minutes, but wanted to let everybody start joining in and loading into the screen here. But hopefully everybody just got off of the other webinar with Lightspeed. Some cool news and interesting insights coming from CEO Brian Provost and a couple others there sharing some things. Mark, I don't know, were you able to join that and watch that, or Brian Tierney, if anything that you liked in particular?
No, I hate to say it. I was busy, so I didn't get to see it, but I'm going to watch it with a big cup of coffee later on today.
I'm really, when we went up to Lightspeed at the end of the last year, one of the key things that I talked about was just from talking to all the dealers, everybody just wants stability and the system to function correctly. And I'm perfectly fine if we didn't do any new features for the next 6 months and just fixed all the quirks. I'd be perfectly fine with that.
They kind of talked through some of the updates, how they're moving to quarterly feature updates, so there's a little bit more time for testing, and monthly maintenance updates, so those continue to happen, and AI updates they'll still do continuously as they're doing. But I've been waiting for the release notes from the last month, but that helps kind of bring it into play of, well, those are coming through with the quarterly now. So
they said they're not gonna. I think that actually the update release is a couple of days behind right now, but there's supposed to be June release notes, but there's not going to be any for May or April, I don't think.
From my understanding, kind of working in the company, is they've done a ton of things behind the scenes really to bolster up the software, and to your point, Mark, maybe fix some of the long-standing issues and short-standing issues. While those may not look apparent to the user and to the consumer, and from a marketing standpoint, they're not that pretty to talk about, but these are things that were necessary for us to move into the future, especially if we start looking at AI and some of the other things they're going to add. So my hope is, to your point, Mark, I think some of the things that they've done, they've invested a ton of money, a ton of time, a ton of development dollars into things to make the system just run better and work better. And I'm confident that we will start to see that.
I do have my first Lightspeed injury. So adding somewhere between 1,400 and 1,600 GL accounts into 3 databases, I drug my arm across my keyboard rest so many times that I ripped all the skin off my arm.
Holy smokes.
Man.
Yeah.
That was a huge undertaking. I've been just watching on the sidelines on that. He sends me little updates on where he's at, and that's a big project when you've got dealerships with different they've been running for years in the database with different charts, and then getting them to align and come together. So huge win there. And it's worth the pain for a lot of people, I would say.
I'd say somewhere between 26 and 30 hours. I just cranked up the techno music and tried to get into the zone and didn't pay attention to anything else.
You can share your trick you learned about how you can change your GL account and keep all your history with the group.
Oh, yeah, actually that's the, you can use the tool that Lightspeed has built when, say, a big dealer group is buying an individual dealer, and they now have a way where you can import all that data into a blank database and kind of map where you want old GL stuff to go into the new ones. So I don't think it's too widely used at this point in time, but kind of the backdoor method would be, if you had a dealer group that's got 2 dealers that are dramatically different, is you could import one of them into a clean database and kind of map where you wanted everything to go. And you'd still have all your parts, service, other history. It wouldn't be like just starting fresh with a clean database.
Okay, yeah, and that's good insight there too. I was more thinking on that subdivide button that you found, where in the chart of accounts. Yeah, go ahead and explain what you found.
Yeah, so the trick there was that we had a database where if you look at the chart of accounts, you need to sort it sequentially, and somebody had sorted it by GL account number and inserted some accounts, and so they were really in the wrong place in the GL. And then they also had some that had some typos in the numbers, so they were actually the wrong numbers. And you can use the little trick of subdividing an account to, let's say that you're working in series 60,000 and you've got an account that's somebody entered it in the 90,000 range. You can subdivide that 90,000 account. It's going to ask you what you want the new account number to be. You can put it back to 60,000. That's going to create that new account with the history under the new number. And then you delete your header and your total account. And now you've got that old history under a new account number without having to call support to get them to run a script to do it.
Yeah, pretty clever.
Yeah, I never used it in that fashion before, and I was like, oh yeah, we've got a dealer we're actually doing the exact same project on right now, and getting their charts to align, and being able to keep that history is valuable. So using that subdivide button, and then it automatically creates the header and total account when you do that. So you just delete those and then have to fix the level on the one account you made or that you changed, but effectively can change your GL codes a little bit faster. So very good.
I stumbled across a lot of learning lessons in that project about, figuring out where to put a GL account in sequence to get it where you want it to be without having to move any of the others and kind of bouncing back and forth. It was I don't want to ever do it again, but I learned a lot. If I had to do it again, I'd be a lot quicker.
There you go. Well, we're coming up. We're on time now, so for everybody that's been listening in, we've just been chatting, giving some people some time to jump on. This webinar is being recorded. We'll make it available on our YouTube channel, Lightspeed. I'm sure we'll share it as well. And if you're on with Tag, if you got Empower Reports, it'll be inside of the video trainings there. Today, this webinar is going to be focused on stocking and parts inventory and in the ordering guide. And Mark Sheffield has done a lot of work in the background, bringing a lot of his knowledge and experience into play on this one. And me and Brian Tierney might be sitting in the back, just like eating a bag of popcorn as we're watching here, seeing all the cool stuff coming out from Mark here. So for those of you who have not joined this series before, we hold this webinar each month now. During the fourth week of each month, and so each time the topics change just a little bit. You can interact with us while Mark is sharing or presenting, or whoever the presenter is. There's a chat and a Q&A option inside of this Zoho meeting that you're in. Feel free to post some questions in there, and Brian Tierney and I will do our best to answer those as well, and maybe bring some of those live to you. So for those who don't know Mark Sheffield, he is an industry expert. He's got a computer for a brain. I think AI learns from him more than he learns from AI at this point. Brian Tierney is a Lightspeed just enthusiast, engineer, salesperson's lived it. Just an extremely knowledge base when you're thinking about Lightspeed and dealership experience there as well. I handle a lot of accounting and operation functions here at the Accounting Guys. So excited to bring this webinar to you. And with that, Mark, I'll turn it over to you and let you take it away.
Cool. Thanks for the invite. So, I think first thing, as she reminds me every time I talk to her, it was probably 6 months ago that Andrea Chappelle or Kemp, she's been divorced a few times. I can't remember what her last name is. She was the one who about 6 months ago had said, hey, why don't you do a little online webinar, just showing dealers some tips and tricks on Lightspeed. And it was going to be a little ad hoc, 30 or 40 people. And somehow it turned into a couple 150 people. In a webinar, and both the two other amigos, Brian and Brian, were reached out and asked to participate in that. So somehow this has turned into something at this point in time. But as Andrea always likes to get credit for it, so this is Andrea. If you're happy with these, then give her some kudos, and if you don't like them, then blame her as well. So I think that she should, she needs to own all of that. So. So
and
today,
she's in our list of attendees, so happy to hear that she saw that.
That's great. Yeah, well, we may have to change the name. Maybe pull it away from Three Amigos to the Andrea or something like that. Who knows?
Andrea or something. Yeah, there
something.
You go.
It could be like 3.5 Amigos. Could be like the 2.5 Men thing.
And all the thousands of dollars that we get for doing this, maybe she needs to get a piece of that.
If there's any money changing hands, I haven't seen any. But if you need my wife,
that's the value of having. That's the value of having the accountant run the thing. Don't worry about it.
That's right.
So today I'm gonna share one screen. We are going to bounce back and forth between two different Lightspeeds and one screen. So I'll probably ask a couple of times if we're actually on the right screen at this point in time. Can you see the Google Sheet that I've got right there?
Just about.
Loading in.
There we go.
All right, so you can see that. All right. So I am at some point near the end of this webinar, I'm going to share this Google Sheet with everybody. There's a bunch of different tabs on here. There's some notes, there's some formulas, there's some shared GBTs, and there's also this seasonal trend, little worksheet calculator that you can utilize. When I share this with you, it's locked down, so you can't make edits to mine. But as long as you're logged into Google, as long as you can see your name up here in the upper right-hand corner when you open up the sheet, if you just come in and click on File and make a copy, that'll make a duplicate that you can own. You can do whatever you want with it. And down the road, I might actually add some more things to the sheet. So if you want to keep the link to the original, then by all means. First thing we are going to talk about is the ordering curve. And if you are used to being in the ordering screen, then you have probably seen this window right here in the middle that's got this little Alps or Rocky Mountains, depending on what you think that needs to look like. But not everybody is always clear on where this comes from. And it actually comes from up here. If we go to System and Ordering, then here in this sales curve section, the system asks you to put down what's your annual sales volume. And this should really be your data from your parts department in your dealership. So not sales, not the entire company. Here comes my cat. So today's podcast brought to you by Fruitables. So from all the parts of the animal that humans will eat. So, excuse me 1 second while I feed the beast.
You mentioned that you were using some of those minnows, Mark.
Oh,
I think, right?
I do have the dried minnows, but I'm
Hey!
one.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's the what's the old Joe Rogan show where they used to eat crazy stuff. Anyway.
When you eat a dried minnow, I'll eat a dried minnow. So the challenge is out there.
Freeze dried minnows, everybody.
All right.
Everybody's doing it.
So anyway, you've got this sales curve up here, and essentially this should be your history that you generate in your parts department. Now, if we go back real quick to this spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you, you can see here that I've given you these orange cells where you can drop in your sales for the last 3 years. So you got 23, 24, and 25. And guess what do we do in the parts department each month? So here we did, 12, 11, 14. And then this is going to give you a total sales, and it's going to give you your monthly average, and it's going to give you your grand total or your percentage. What you can do is you're just going to take those numbers and update this from this monthly average. You're just going to drop these numbers over here into these cells in Lightspeed, and everything should come up to, if you're just putting the raw numbers in here, everything's going to come up to your grand total. This should match what you've got down here, and then everything's going to match out to be 100% as well. So this is what drives what you see on the ordering screen. So if you have not updated this in the last 10 years, then this may not actually represent what you're doing in your parts department. And if you don't know where to get all of that sales history, if you're in a 20 group, most 20 group provide this information. If not, just get with the owner or the GM and say, hey, can you give me my sales volume for the last 3 years? You can come in and fill yours out, but you really want this to be current and correct so that when you're running your buying guide, the system kind of knows, okay, if we're in June, in this example right here, June is 9.5% of the total sales volume for this parts department for the year. This is going to be different for different dealers. And so if you're just using the default sales curve that came with your Lightspeed system, and let's say that was built for a dealer down in Florida where their seasonal curve is relatively flat, and you're up in Saskatchewan, hopefully I said that correctly, your sales curve may be very different. It might be all snowmobile related, and during the summer, you're out having fun while everybody else is working their asses off. So
good question for you there, Mark. How often do you update the numbers in Lightspeed? Every month? Do you update your average and change it, or how often do you update those?
For most dealers, once every couple of years is perfectly fine. You really just don't need to do it that often. It's not going to change that much between 1 year and the next. But what we do recommend is always use 3 years, because if you just use 1 year, let's say that you're in Utah and you had a big fire this month, and all of a sudden your sales go down to $300 that month. If you're just using this 1 year's worth of sales, then you're going to have a big delta that's going to occur right there, and you really don't want to mess things up. So by utilizing 3 years worth of data, we kind of dampen out any of those oddball things that happen in 1 year. Answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So once we've got our sales curve put in, we're just going to click on save. Now our system's going to be updated. Now, once we come in here, we're going to look at the guide, and we're going to stick with the default guide or the default sales curve that was in Lightspeed. So we can see that if we were to start out right here on 6/24/2026, and we said we wanted a half month of supply, then that's going to represent 6% of our year. So we're saying that we're going to buy for 6% of our year. I typically, when I'm running the buying guide, I'm usually somewhere between about 1.5 and 2.5 months. And I'll juggle that a little bit based on the brand, what I need to get in there. But you can see right here that if we change this to 2% of or 2 months of the year, then we're buying for 26.1% of the year, because our sales curve is so steep right here at this point that we're into right now. Now, you also could be building an order that you could be thinking about doing snowmobiles right here. And you could say, well, I don't really want this to start right now. I want to see what I'm going to order later on in this year. You can change the start date. So we could push it back a couple of months and say that we wanted to do September 1st. And now the system is going to start and look at, okay, if we did 2 months out from September 1st, that's going to be 17.9% of our year. So you can kind of juggle that start date a little bit. One of the big pushbacks that I get from dealers about utilizing the buying guide is they'll tell me, well, the buying guide is good for the overall department, but I'm a very seasonal dealer. I do watercraft in March, April, May, and I do snowmobiles in December through March. And so the buying guide doesn't work for me because it's not structured that way. The good thing about Lightspeed is it actually does work the way that you want it to, as long as you do one thing, as long as you utilize sales categories in the system. And this buying or this sales curve right here is the default for the entire system. But if we go into system, list, and sales categories, and we find, I'm just going to bounce back here. So we've got this sales category, APP-S-O. Let's say that this happens to be our sales curve for snowmobiles. We can come into our sales categories, drop that in here, and then we can come in here. And if this was our snowmobile category, we can say, you know what? We don't want to use the default sales curve for this because this is a very seasonal product. And now we can put our sales curve in here. And what you may ultimately want to do for some of these seasonal products is, just like on this spreadsheet, you have kind of your company level sales curve. You could get this same data for your snowmobile sales in your dealership. And so you could log in, what are my snowmobile sales every month of the year? Put that in here. You're going to find that these grand totals are going to peak. You know, it might be 20 or 25, 30% is going to be 1 or 2 months. You can come in and put that information in here. And so now all of a sudden, what's going to happen is when you run the buying guide for these parts at this point in time, as it gets to September, it's going to ignore this sales curve right here on parts that have that category, and it's going to use a sales curve that you put in over here. So as long as you're utilizing sales categories within Lightspeed, you can actually make the buying guide work for you for all of those seasonal products. If it's just regular things, you know, tires, wheels, rims, roofs for ATVs, all of that stuff, the general purpose seasonal curve is probably going to work for you. But on those very seasonal products, the system does allow you to work around that and make the buying guide work for you.
One of the pitfalls that I can remember, Mark and Brian, when I was a parts guy, and this was back in the Stone Ages, was I just defaulted every single part to ACC. And sadly, I think a lot of our dealerships do the very same thing. Many of the folks behind the parts counter just are not aware that that category has a significant impact on the way things work, including what you just described. So if you're recognizing that you have a lot of ACC or a lot of a category in your parts inventory, just be aware of that and really reconsider the way you're categorizing your products, because that's parts 101. But sadly, I was to blame for many of those, and I'm sure lots of our dealers are tackling that as well.
I think that's a good call out of, that's one way you can tell if you have an order taker versus a parts manager. right? Parts managers care about the categories and where things are displayed. Otherwise, you just have people taking orders. And so we see that a lot amongst all of our dealers as well, that it just naturally, oh, I'm putting it in ACC because then all my buttons will work. Or they just leave all the categories come in and is added from price books and don't put any names to them. And so, you know, if they're actually managing the list of categories, it significantly changes the way the system is designed, right? The whole reason why most dealers bought Lightspeed was for the parts inventory tool at the beginning.
Well, if you do have a supplier who's very seasonal, you know, when you come in and set up your suppliers, you get to define what you want the default category to be for them. And so you can set a default category in here for that individual supplier, though it's not just going to be the general purpose ACC one. And that way, as you're adding new parts into the system, it's going to come in with that new sales category. I will say that updating these sales categories in mass is a very laborious task. But the best way that you can do this, if you want to work towards having good sales categories that work for you, is, you know, define what those 30, 40, 50 categories are going to be. I don't think you want to go too granular, but you don't want to be too wide as well. Define what those are going to be. And then as you, the parts manager, are placing these orders, and as you're kind of auditing the screen right here, before you place the order, just come in and go, you know what, I'm just going to change the category to what it needs to be for this particular item. And so you can change those right here. See if we can find one for parts. So you could say, okay, this is a Harley Davidson part. I'm going to go ahead and make that a Harley Davidson category now. When you do that, at this point in time, that category has actually not changed for that part. You have to click on another line, or you have to do something else on that screen. And once you do that, it goes back and it changes that category on the part in your inventory. And you don't have to go and open the part number up. You don't. You know, now if we come into this part number, we're going to see that because I clicked on another line, it has been updated to PM3. So you don't have to open this up. So quick time saver to update and change all those in the screen instead of just saying, you know what, I'm just going to mass do it. I'm going to open up, you know, my parts inventory window. I'm going to itemize all the parts that I've got on hand, and then I'm going to go through all these and update them one at a time. It is mind numbing. There's lots of dealers that have done it. If it were me, I'd probably break it up. And what I would do is print out a list of all our on-hand parts, divide it by supplier and current category, and then just hand those out to my parts people and say, every day you get to do one page, and over a couple of months, you'll get it all done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Close that.
A quick question from the group there. If I change the category in the parts inventory screen, will that automatically update the category showing on the order?
It will not. So you kind of get into what he's talking about, I believe, is here in the parts inventory screen. If we pull up a part, and this is something that's controlled by security. So if you don't have this, it's something that your management team might need to turn on for you. But coming in here to this part, if we right click on it, we can click on change the sales category, and we can do that right here in the parts inventory screen. So if you have some good parts counter people, they can knock that out right there. At this point in time, I believe as soon as I do this, if I click on OK, and now if we go and look at this part number, we can see that it's already been changed to bars here. But if you had this part was sitting in your parts ordering screen, and it was already here before you changed it in parts invoicing, it would not be updated right here. You'd still need to do it here. When you place the PO, if the parts inventory was under one category and the PO was under another, I'm not sure which one would win. I'd have to try it out and find out what happened when you actually received it, which one stuck. But yeah, I recommend, you know, if your parts guys are doing it right here, and let's say that they went to change this category right here, and then they ordered this part, when it put it onto the parts ordering screen at that point in time, it would have the new sales category. But if you had one here, just in here for stock, no, it would not be updated as well. Even if you clicked on the refresh button, I don't believe that it updates the sales categories.
I might do a little quick experiment while you're working there, Mark, and see if I can confirm that.
Okay, good question though.
Yeah, very good.
So So once we have got our ordering curve designed and put together, now we are ready to run the buying guide. And I'm going to drop over to a live system because there is not a ton of data in this test system here.
Might be some Jeff Emig data in there.
There's a lot, but he pays everything. He pays cash for everything, and
Oh, yeah.
he only buys stuff that's in stock. So there's really no orders in there.
That's true.
So if we go into the ordering screen here, and we're going to run the guide. This point in time, and I think here's a mistake that a lot of parts managers make when they try to do this, is they go to run the buying guide for everything, and it's just too much. Getting your data cleaned up and organized and set up to really support the use of the buying guide is a process. It takes some time. I would never recommend that you come in here first time and just do 10 suppliers. Come in and say, okay, I'm going to do one supplier. I'm going to clean that supplier up. I'm going to make sure everything looks good. And then I'll move on to the next one going forward. So if I was going to run the guide for a couple of months, I'm going to click on clear right here because I don't want to do all the suppliers. And I'm just going to come down and I'm going to find Indian since it's kind of nice and clean. And you also, if you wanted to do it for a very small subset of data, you could, let's say that Western reaches out to you and says, hey, this month we've got a special on spark plugs. You theoretically could come in here and select all of your suppliers down here under your code, unselect everybody. And if you're using a spark plug sales category, we could just come down and find that one for spark plugs, and we could run it for 2 or 3 months. And then that would look at every part number we've got in the database from any vendor that has a spark plug category on it. And it would give us a broad list of all the plugs that we need for all of our vendors that we work with. And then we can figure out what we want to need and take advantage of that sale that Western is putting on that month. But here, I'm just going to run this buying guide for Indian. So that's all I really want to look at. And I'm just going to extract a couple of categories. I'm going to say, well, these are the OBS items. We've written those off. I don't want to look at those anymore. And so now I'm going to click on Run Guide. And at this point in time, the system is going to generate a suggested order for me based on that 2-month window of opportunity and my sales history. Now, real quick, let's go and look at how the math on this works, because it's one piece that a lot of people don't understand. So if we come in here, and this will be on the spreadsheet that I share with everybody, so feel free to use this. You can come in and put in whatever numbers you want to be in there. But the system's going to look at how many do we have on hand that are available. So not how many do we have on hand that are on layaway or special order, but what's available. How many do we have on order that are not committed to a customer? And then do we have a line in the buying guide that already has some of those parts sitting in here? Let me go back to this other Lightspeed system real quick. So do we have, this part number 2-BR80S right here? If we were running the buying guide for these spark plugs and the system showed that we had 20 in here, it's going to consider that you're going to order these 20 already. So that's going to be included in your insight quantity. So if we go back to our spreadsheet here, we can say that our insight, which is on hand available, plus on order, not committed, plus anything that's in the buying guide, our insight quantity is 6. Our rolling 12 sales are 50 of an item. We've said that we're going to run for a couple of months. So that turns out to be 22% based on that little percentage that calculates up in the top of the buying guide. And so what is 22% of 50 is 11. So that's going to be the total the system thinks that we need to order. And then it's going to subtract the insight quantity from that. So our math says order 11, but we've got 6 that are already available that we can utilize in one way, shape, or form. So the system is going to tell you to order an additional 5. The one thing about the buying guide that is not very smart, and today there's not a good solution for this, is that if you did an engine rebuild and you had to put 20 bolts in the bottom of that crankcase and you ordered those all new and you ran the buying guide for that part and you ran it for a couple of months, the system's going to come back and it's not going to tell you to order 20, even if that's all that you need. it's going to tell you to order 2 or 3. It's just not super smart today. At some point down the road, I think that there will be, more technology that applies to the buying guide. I think that it'll get better down the road. But today, you just got to understand that it's kind of one of those quirks. So when you run the buying guide, you still got to proof what it gives you, but it gives you pretty good data. If we go back and we look at here, so I ran the buying guide for Indian, and now here's, I think, one place where I kind of vary from some of the other dealers who utilize the buying guide, is that you can look at the part numbers on this piece of paper if you wanted to print this out. If you have items with min-max set up, it's going to tell you what those min-max quantities are. If they're on force order, it's going to show up on here. I have looked at this printout here. Is probably the longest that I've ever looked at this printout in the last 20 years. I just don't use this. I just come in and I click on update, and it's going to take all of that data and it's going to drop it into my ordering screen right here. And then I'm just going to, since we were working on Indian, I'm going to change to IND. And now I'm just looking at those parts, and I can look at these parts on the screen, and then I can pretty quickly use the data that's here on the screen to help me figure out what I need to order and what I don't actually need. Did you do some testing there, Tierney?
I did. So I put an item on special order, dropped it into the order screen, changed the supplier code. The purchase order didn't reflect the changes. So it looks like, to your point, Mark, if you change the sales category on the parts invoice screen, it does reflect an inventory. If you change it on the ordering screen, it does reflect the changes. But if you change it after you've created a purchase order, the purchase order retains the original category.
Yeah.
And then if you when you receive that part, does it then change the parts inventory to effectively undo the work you might have done?
Oh, good question. Let's pop in here.
Maybe try that out next.
I'm guessing when you receive it that it's going to keep the supplier category that's on the PO.
It did keep the supplier category on the PO.
All right, thanks for testing that. So let's talk for a minute about the options you have in your parts. So if we go in here and we look at a part, we really have 4 options that we can utilize with that part. So we can put it on sales curve, which is going to use our seasonal trend that we put together and the math. We can put it on force to 1, and I've given you all a little cheater on this spreadsheet. So if we use a sales curve, then it's going to use what do we have in sight and what does our sales history look like to calculate how many the system thinks that we need. If we put a part on force to 0, it will never again show up on your buying guide. You'll never see that part again. No matter if you're selling 100 a month, it's never going to tell you to order that part. The only time you'll ever see it on the ordering screen is when somebody special orders it for a customer. You have force to 1, which says, I don't care about the history. Whenever we get down to 0 in stock, tell me to order 1 more. If you sold 1 million of those parts every day and you had it on force order, when you get down to 0, it's going to tell you to order 1. It's not going to tell you to order 1 million. And so got to be careful with that. And then you have min-max. And min-max, the way that it works is if you have a part that's got a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 8, when you get down to 3, it's going to tell you to order enough to get you back to the maximum quantity. So min 4, max 8, 3 in sight, it's going to tell you to order 5 more to get you back to that 8. You can utilize the min-max as a variant of the force order. So let's say that force to 1 is not really enough for you, but you really don't want that wide range of 4 to 8. Let's say that you decide that you want 3 of that part number in stock. You can actually come in and you could just set your min and your max both to 3. And that would be like force to 1, but it would be force to 3 at that point in time. When you got down to 2, it would tell you to order 1 more and get you back up to your stocking level of 3. So you can kind of make the system work in your favor a little bit. Here is probably the most controversial thing that I'll say before 2 o'clock this afternoon. I do not like min-max. I try to use it as little as possible. And here's really the big reason that I don't like utilizing min-max. If you're a Polaris dealer, if you're a BRP dealer, if you're a Kawasaki dealer, all of those manufacturers have programs in place. And all of them, if you're working, some of those programs, you can save 5, 10, with Kawasaki, 13.8%, you can save on some of your big orders. If you rely a lot on force order and min max, you cannot use the system to help you build those orders, because let's say that you've got a front bumper for a Defender that you sell a lot of, but you've got min and max set up on that item for 2 and 3, and you've got 2 in stock, and you're trying to build an order in the system to generate kind of my suggestion on what I want to place on this program order with the manufacturer. If you got 2 and your min is at 2, it's not going to tell you to order anymore. And so the way that I use force and min max, let's say Kawasaki just came out with the brand new supercharged H2 3 or 4 months ago. I'm going to have a parts employee go through and look up the air filter for that, look up the spark plugs, kind of all the consumables that go along with that vehicle. That's a brand new vehicle. It's going to take a while for us to sell some. It's going to take a while for us to build up some sales history. I'm going to put the air filter on force to 1. I don't have any sales history on it, but I want to keep 1 in stock. And so when we sell 1, the system's going to tell me to order a second. And let's say that the new H2 Supercharged uses a brand new spark plug. It needs 4 of them. Again, I don't need to have 20 in stock to kind of deal with when sales history picks up 3 or 4 years down the road. I might set my min max on those spark plugs to 4 and 4. That way, system's going to tell me to order 4. When we get down to 0, or let's say that somebody just buys a couple of them for whatever reason, the system's going to tell me to order 2 more to get back up to that 4 level, so that when that customer comes in, that unit is in the service department and they need 4 spark plugs, we've got 4 spark plugs in stock. What I am going to do with that, though, is that as let's say that we're 3 or 4 years down the road, we've sold a bunch of these supercharged H2s. Kawasaki's not paying me to say this. I hope we get to that point. I hope we're selling a ton of them. And when we need a ton of air filters and spark plugs in stock, we're not quite there yet, but let's be optimistic and hope we get to that point. At some point down the road, when our sales history starts to have some decent activity in it, my goal always is to take items that were on force order and get them onto the sales curve. It's always to take items that are on min max and get them onto the sales curve. I want to allow the system to work for me. And if you're using force or if you're using min max reliably, then you can't make the system work for you. And if you're not paying attention, let's say that you're a big watercraft dealer during the summer and you set your covers up so that you've got, 3 or 4 wave jammer covers during the summer. If you've got those set up on min max, even when you're out of season, every time you run your buying guide, if you got 1 or 2 in stock, it's going to tell you to order 2 or 3 more of those covers, even when you're out of season. So the buying guide just doesn't work for you anymore once you really start relying on force and min max. So I think both of those have their place, but I definitely would not rely on them. I would allow the system to work the way the system is designed. And the best way to do that is by relying on the sales curve. Tierney, you have any thoughts on that?
I think
two
you
quick
just
things, then I'll have Brian jump in. Sorry to
Yeah.
cut you off. So one quick thing is, a dealer said it'd be really nice on the sales default ordering if Lightspeed would just populate it for you. And then another person said they're brand new to Lightspeed, so they don't have enough history. So it's using min and max bad. And so my, thought there is it's nice that you can add all those sales curves without having to have the history in the system. But it as far as the ordering guide, how does that affect what you just mentioned there for somebody brand new to the system?
So both of those, if probably a little bit late in your case, but if you were on or have been on another DMS and you're thinking about moving into Lightspeed, then in most cases, any old system that you had, you can usually get some sales history out of that and get Lightspeed to import that for you so that you have something. At this point in time, if you don't have anything, I would do exactly what you said. I would rely more on force and min max right now until you start building up some sales history. But as and we'll talk about this in just a little bit, as you start to build history, my end goal for you would be to get off force and to get off min max as quickly as you possibly can. And depending on how you do the math, if your seasonal curve looks something like this, then your activity is going to be a little bit more volatile. If your seasonal curve looks something like this, where we're here in Texas, it's a pretty flat sales curve. What's going to happen is that if I get this number to about 20%, so we got 21.3% here, you kind of do the math. When you start selling something 4 times a year, it's going to start populating 1 on your buying guide when you get down to 0. So just kind of the way the math works. I could put that on the spreadsheet if you'd like, so that everybody's got a copy of that, so you can kind of see how it works. But again, once you start selling something about 4 times a year, if you've got a pretty flat sales trend, at that point in time, it's always going to tell you to order 1 when you get down to 0. If you only got sales history for 2 or 3, what you may have to do kind of short term for that dealer who's kind of building up their sales history is what you might want to do is kind of change this window here and run it for a little bit longer. And so you've got less sales history. By changing this window and running for a longer period of time, you're making that limited sales history that you have work for you. The downside of that is that if you sold some nuts and bolts and things like that you don't want to restock, you're still going to see those in your buying guide. But we can work around those, and I'll kind of show you a few tips and tricks here. As to the question from the other dealer about automatically populating those within the ordering screen here, I've heard that from other dealers as well. I think there's some other DMSs out there that when you put items on force or min max, they will put those in here. I'm not going to use my limited political capital to get Lightspeed to do that, because I want to get every dealer that I can off force and off min max. And so I want every dealer to start utilizing the sales curve. But the answer to your question is that if you are utilizing force and relying on that, or you are relying on min max, no, it doesn't automatically put them in here, but it really is a couple of clicks to make that work for you. So if you have got a lot of items on min max, you could run this for like the minimal setting right here, and you could just do it for that supplier that you're talking about. And when you ran that, any of those items that you have on force or on min max, where you have now fallen your stocking level below what the minimum was, or if it's on force to 1, if you fall into 0, those items are going to populate the ordering screen. So does it do it automatically? No, but can you do it with a couple of clicks? You could easily make that happen. So maybe not the best answer, but does work. And by changing this down to the bare minimum right here, you're not going to see all the other fluff on there. The only things you're really going to see are those items on force and those items on min max. Any other questions from the gallery?
I think Mr. Lucas is answering one, but we've got a question about why can't we choose the way the parts are hitting the order screen as it relates to buying guide. Under the guise it's all or nothing. And maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but just to clarify, and I think you touched on this, Mark, is every single part number has its own reorder point attached to it. Now the default is sales curve, as we know, but you can change it to min max or force to 1 or force to 0. And I just want to make sure that the person asking the question knows about that. I think we talked about that, but I hope I'm answering that correctly. I think Mr. Lucas just answered it in text there.
I think we're going to have some Q&A time at the end of this one. So I know the other ones we've kind of run long, but I think we'll have plenty of time in this one once I get through these other things.
I'm going to circle back real quick, Mark, because I was halfway paying attention and waiting for the caffeine to kick in to answer the thought of what happens when you change the sales category through a multi-step process. And I got a response back from Lynn, who asked the question earlier. She sent me an email and a case note, so I'm going to research that a little bit deeper for her. But let me just set the stage again. So I'm creating a special order for a part. The part number exists as ACC in inventory. And during the creation of the special order, I change it to something else. Then it shows up on the order screen. I change it from that something else to something else in the order screen, which updates inventory and it updates the item in the order screen. It then gets sent to the receiving screen as the now currents. So I went from ACC to PAM. And when I'm receiving it, I went to ABT. So when I went to pick up the special order, it does reflect the change in receiving at ABT, and so does inventory reflect that ABT. So it looks like every step along the way as I'm making changes, special orders and inventory seeing those changes as it occurs. And I think I answered that incorrectly or halfway coherently a moment ago. hopefully that
I think
clarifies.
that she might also be referring to when you change the categories, unlike on the unit. So on major unit inventory, when you change the categories, the accounting side actually makes an adjustment to move the inventory value for you. But on the parts side, it doesn't. It doesn't change what inventory account those parts sit in on the balance sheet. And so from my perspective, I guess a month-end procedure that should always happen to catch instances like this would be comparing your parts inventory valuation report and your balance sheet, and you do make the journal entry to effectively move those balances. You could do it more often, but we typically do it once a month. But revenue and cost of goods sold should be okay, and everything else related to the journal entry. It's just where your inventory is sitting in stock, and so there's not an issue on your P&L, but on your balance sheet, you do have to move that manually with the journal entry if you're switching categories, and they happen to have different inventory accounts.
Perfect. But yeah, to answer your question, Mark, you convinced me. I will lean on sales curve more often than min max, where min max has been a kind of a cozy blanket for many parts people for a long time. Your depiction of it now has made that a wet blanket, so I think I'm going to lean more on the sales curve now.
And I think you're going to see more of these program orders for the manufacturers. Even like recently last month, and I'm kind of focusing on Indian right here, but Indian just released a bi-monthly order program where you can get a 5% discount on certain parts. We created a quick GBT where you can actually save your PO, run it through a GBT, and it'll tell you what parts on there you can get that 5% discount on, so you can split those POs up. So a lot of cool things you can do with this.
One more quick question, not to take it completely off your agenda for the day, but they've got min-max settings set on basically everything. So is there a way do I have to do that manually for each one? We've been talking about doing a series on the data update tool, which probably needs its own 90 minutes to dig into, which you do have the ability to change the maximum and minimum quantities in there. And I don't know if the question is to kind of delete it or switch it to sales curve.
Yeah,
but
you do have this sales tool here that again, we have talked about doing a future class on how this works, because if you are not very careful in how you use this, you can do a lot of damage. But one of the neat things about utilizing this is that if you have a bunch of parts that are on min-max, you can go back and change the order type on those to sales curve and leave those min-max quantities in there. So let's say you had a bunch of items that were 4, 8, or 5 and 10. When you go into that part, let's see which Lightspeed system I'm in. If let's say that we had this part right here that was 5 and 10. And we had it set as min-max, you could run that tool and change everything to sales curve, and it would still leave your 5 and 10 in there. So you'd still have those on the screen as kind of an identifier to let you know where they are. And if you really just made a big mistake and you're like, this is not working for me, you could go back and have them put those items back on min-max, and then you'd still have your original quantities there. So a little bit of work, no harm, no foul, until we get to doing the class on that other one. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, Tierney, but that might be one of the ones where you could call into support, get level 2, and say, hey, could you just run a script for me and change all my parts that are on min-max back to the sales curve? And they would test it real quick, make sure that it's good, and then do that for you. And then you wouldn't have the risk of making a mistake if you're not comfortable making some of those mass updates.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. That way you've got somebody who potentially can restore a backup if something goes sideways, right? So,
yeah.
And I would say if we get into where we're doing a class on that class is going to come with some caution tape around it, right? So, I think it's a worthy subject for a future webinar.
The mass updates are powerful. There is one thing about the mass updates that you can't do. And hopefully at some point this gets updated, but it ties into accounting, is you can't do mass updates to update your sales categories. So there's still, it's the most painful thing in the world, but you still have to do sales categories one at a time.
There is that category merge. Well, I don't know if the merge tool. There is a category update tool. It's a little bit.
No, it's not category. You can do by vendor and you can do make, but I don't believe there's a sales category merge.
Well, let's
You
take.
can take a category and copy all the GL mapping behind it to a different category, but that's really the extent of making that a little quicker for you to update those.
Check this out and just see if this is any way helpful. Maybe this isn't, but maybe I've identified spark plugs as taillight lenses or something like that. So I'd have to understand what it is that I've identified wrong. But if you go to parts, the parts menu there, Mark, and go to inventory updating and change parts categories or change part categories. There's kind of it's a dashboard interface. So it's a little bit challenging because you can't, where the update tool gives you the ability to really drill into very fine details, but you can say all these things that I've identified as cats and I want to turn them into dogs. You can do that, but I can't say that I just want maybe the cats that I've identified with short tails versus long tails. I'm a little bit limited on, I'm sorry, I'm using pet analogies, but you have a little bit of limitation on how you can define these things, but this might help. This might help a little bit.
Yeah, you can kind of do it broad-based in here, but it doesn't it's not like NXT and NXT. You could
Right.
do that basic update. You could scroll down the list and update, a couple of hundred sales categories, click save, and it was done. There's just no grid view to do that. And, talking about that, I've had lots of dealers I've talked to over the last year who would love kind of that grid update to be available for major units as well. So bulk updating of pricing and things like that.
Is that a hint?
So, yeah, I try to drop those every 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah. I've had those conversations too, and I'm with you. Having used that tool before, I kind of miss it too. Probably shouldn't be saying that, but I did.
Kind of a couple of I think things that really get overlooked in the screen, and if you start utilizing the buying guide like we use it, and like I think it's designed to be used, then there are a couple of tips and tricks that you can do to make working in the screen easier. And one of those is sorting these categories. And you can see here that I've got my biggest sort is by SO invoice type and order type, and then by part number. And so, what I've done by doing this is now all my special orders for customers are down at the bottom because I don't want to look at those. And then by adjusting by this order type here, I've taken things that I've already put into different order categories and just moved them down to the bottom so I don't have to look at them. And the way that you do that, let's say that your screen is just sorted by part number. All you do is we're going to come in, we're going to hold down, we're going to click on the first one that we want to sort by. You can do up, or you can click it again to do down. We're going to do up. Then I'm going to hold down the control key. I'm going to click on order type, and then third time, I'm going to click on part number. And so now what the system is doing is taking all my special orders for customers, putting them down at the bottom. It's taking anything that I've put into a new sales category and moved it down right above those. And then my part numbers are in sequential order. So I'm kind of working through the list in an orderly fashion. You only have 3 sort options in here. There are some screens where you have more than that, and a couple where you have less. And if you right click on this blue bar, there actually is a couple of items you can turn on or off if you want to use those in your dealership. The other one that I think a lot of dealers kind of miss on the screen, and I've talked to development about this, and I swear that at one point back down the road, this used to be different. But if you have a part that's on order for a customer, it's committed on a special order, it doesn't show up on the screen. This screen only says you have 0 on order, even if you did have one on order for a customer. And I would swear that in a previous lifetime that this actually used to show all the parts that were on order, even for customers. But if you're looking at this screen and you're like, man, I think that we've got one of those on order, or I think something is going on with that part, you've got this little caret down here at the bottom of the screen, and you can click on that. And now, without having to go to your special order and PO screens, you've got these 2 tabs down here. You can see all of your POs for that part, or you can look at all of your special orders that are currently outstanding or that have been picked up as well, just by what little radio buttons you click down here. So it takes up a little bit extra space when I'm not using it. I kind of minimize it like that. but it is nice when you're trying to figure out, hey, let's see if I've got one of these parts here that shows to be probably these batteries. Yeah, so right here, let's say that I'm looking at these batteries and the screen tells me that I've got 10 available and I've got 17 on order. Maybe I want to go back and look at how long ago did I place these. In a lot of cases, dealers are going to the part and then they're going to history and taking a look at it right there, where when you've got that part highlighted, we can just click on this caret and now we've got our PO and our special order information is right here on the screen. So kind of a big time saver. You can also pop the screen out too. So you can move it around, you can move it onto another screen. And when you do that, you you get a little bit more real estate on your screen as well. Lost it there. So let me try to bring it back. So there it is again. But we can also put it back in its place. So that's kind of the starting point to how I get my data in here. Now let's kind of talk about the nuances of what shows up in here and how things show up and how we're going to clean this up. So at this point in time, we've run the buying guide. So we've said that we wanted to run it for Indian for 2.5 months. We've got all of those part numbers have been saved in here to the screen. And at this point, we need to edit these. But let's think about how stuff got here. There are a couple of things that everybody needs to understand about similar parts. And so if we go to 704-5661, and I think that a lot of people didn't really understand, if you've never used the buying guide, you may not truly understand what similar parts are for. And this particular part number right here, 704-5661H, you can see we've got similar parts set up, but I've taken the most current number and I've set it as my base number, and all the other parts are similar parts. Now, why did I do that? What I'm telling the system here is that when I run the buying guide, I don't want to order these old parts that have been superseded to the new ones. This is the part number that I'm going to order today. With the system set up like this, it's going to look at the sales history for all 4 of these parts. It's going to do that math that's on my sheet right here. Somewhere. It's going to do the math on the sheet, and then it's going to come back and tell me, here's how many of this part that I need to order. It's also going to look at, do we have any of these old parts that are still on order, anything else going along. But this is what similar parts is really designed for, is to make the buying guide work for you. Now, let's say I'm going to show you how we do our tires. We create what we call some base part numbers for our tires. And they just kind of look like the tire size. With these, I utilize reference parts. Why do I utilize reference? Because in this particular situation, I want every one of these part numbers to stand on their own. There's not just one 190, 50, 17 that I want to stock. I might want to keep a couple of Michelins. I might want to keep a couple of Dunlops. I might want to keep a Metzler in this size. And if I were to come in here and just make one of these part numbers base, then, and I ran the buying guide, it's going to take all of the sales history for all these other parts and tell me to order that many of this part number right here. So we really want items like this to be set up under reference parts. And even within this, you can still, let's say that we've got this Western Power Sports part right here. I'm going to click on cancel here. If I go in and put that WPS part right in here. Oh, and one of the other things that I found the other day, and just kind of show this to everybody real quick. When you paste a part number in here, the system actually doesn't go and look for that automatically. And what a lot of dealers do is they do a backspace to get the list, and then you got to put the part number back in there. But there is one trick that works in this screen that doesn't work anywhere else in Lightspeed. Once you paste your part number in there, just hit a space, and it does the same thing for you. So you don't have to do the little backspace. One place where it kind of trims that extra space out of there. But just as you kind of work your way through the system, ACO would be quick and fast. But here, this part is listed as a reference part with all these other ones. But let's say that this is the part number that I always want to keep one of in stock. Right now, I've got one, but maybe like that other dealer said a little while ago, hey, I don't have a lot of history in the system. Well, if I come in here and look, I sold 4 last year. I've got, 2 and 1 in June and July, but I've only got 1 this year. There's a possibility that if I were not to sell this tire for July or August, that I wouldn't have enough sales history to even come back when I ran the buying guide to tell me to order one of these. What I may want to do with this part is just go ahead and put it on force order. And that way, even though it's part of the similar part chain, when I get down to 0, I run the buying guide. The system is going to come back and tell me to order one of those. So you can kind of utilize this in conjunction with your similar parts. I'm kind of a similar part Nazi. So when items supersede, we've got the old part number, we're placing the order with the manufacturer, and there's a new part number in there. I'm going to set up my similar parts chain, and I'm going to make sure that whatever the newest part number is, that's my base part number. So that way, as we're running the buying guide down the road, that's what we're going to reorder. There are some cases where you will run a buying guide and you'll have a part that shows up in the screen right here, and you'll look down at the history and there won't be a similar part tied to it, and you won't see any history whatsoever. That's typically because the old part numbers that you had sales history on have superseded to the new one, and you have not you've not sold the new one yet, and it has not been linked up as a similar part. Kind of the quick way, I think, can I put a note down here? Yeah, so if we go back, let's say that I run the buying guide and that 704-5661 shows up in my screen. Not the best case right here, but let's say that there's no sales history on it, and I want to know, why did that part number show up on this screen? What I typically do is I'll just take that part number, come back here, drop it in, hit my space bar, and now I can kind of see here are the old part numbers that potentially had sales history that superseded to that new one. At this point in time, if I go in and look at this one, the price book has said, hey, it supersedes to 5661. So that's what I think you as a dealer need to order. And so at that point in time, me as a dealer, as I'm cleaning up the system and I want to leave good notes for myself, I would come in and link these parts up as similar parts. I would make the newest one the one that we need to order. That would become my base part number, and the other ones would just be similar parts. And next time that I ran my buying guide, now when I see that part that's in here and it doesn't have any sales history, I can click on similar part and see what those other older parts were. One other thing you can do with similar parts, and again, kind of one of those times where I'm going to drop a little hint for Lightspeed, is that if you come in here and you say, you know what, it's actually this part is the part that I want to order, you can double click on that and it'll put that part number into this section here. Yeah, because I had the H before. Well, let's say I did 3056. The problem with doing that is that when you switch those similar parts, for whatever reason, the sales history down at the bottom does not update. And so whenever you utilize that similar parts feature, you always have to come in and hit the refresh button. And then when you come back down to look at that part number, the sales history that represents down here at the bottom of the screen will be correct. But as you're utilizing your similar parts and you're kind of bouncing around, if you're just switching in this screen, you do have to hit that refresh button in order to have good sales history on the screen. If we can get that sorted at some point in time, that would be great.
Yes, sir. Making a note right now.
The other thing that is becoming pretty useful, and again, I said learning how to use the buying guide is a process. You'll look, if you see here on my screen, you'll see that a lot of the parts that we have in our database have notes on them. I've created, I've got this harness chassis right here. I don't know what it fits, but I can see that we sold 3 last year. I sold 1 this year. As I was going through my buying guide, I would probably want to figure out, what this part number is, what it does. I can go back and do all the research, but I've kind of shortcutted that for you. So if we take that part number right here, and you'll find this in the spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you, but there is a custom GPT in here. Let me find it real quick. So you can open up this GPT. It's designed to go out for power sports dealers, marine and RV. If I put this part number in here, it's going to take it a few seconds to think. It'll go out and look at the different sites that are out on the web and try to figure out what this part goes to. You can, as you're kind of, again, cleaning this up as a process, but you can have some other tasks you can do. You can work on other part numbers in the system. Sometimes it works a little bit quicker. Obviously, I picked up an older part, but now I can just come in here, copy that. I can come into my notes screen and I can put those notes from ChatGPT in here, and it's going to tell me, what does this fit? So it fits a Chieftain, a Roadmaster, a Springfield from 2014 to 2018. And so now I can save that. And again, this doesn't update here, just like when you do similar parts. But if I click on refresh, now when I come down to that part, I've got my notes that are right here on the screen. So I can see those every time this part number populates on the screen. Kind of gives me a little bit more insight. And is there something that I should do with this part number? The other thing that you can do is, let's say, hey, we're really thinking about ordering this part. I can click on it here. I can go back and look at my sales history, and I can see, like, we ordered one for Mr. Ball at some point in time. If I click on his invoice number, then I can also see that we had to order some other parts that went along with that. So we had to get an ECM, we had to get a screw. We sold a couple of other pieces that we had in stock. So I would have to kind of, do a little bit of legwork on this part and figure out, is that something that I want to order? It might be that that's just a part that I never want to order. I don't want to see it on my screen again. So I can just come down here. I could change it to force to 0. And then in the future, I would not see that part populate on the buying guide anymore. I tend to kind of veer away from using force to 0, except for things like nuts and bolts and kind of the rivets, items that you might sell 10, 20, 30 of at a time, but maybe you really don't want to stock them. I would tend to, on a part like this, it may become something pretty soon that we want to stock. It's kind of right there on that threshold of our internal guidance is if we sell something 4 times a year, we're going to start looking at, is that something that we need to stock? But this particular case, that's how I can get some notes onto these parts. And when I share the spreadsheet with you, that link to that GPT is in the spreadsheet. You can use it with a free GPT account. If you try to use it more than about 10 times in a day, you'll kind of hit the limits on the free account. You may want to look at buying one for your parts department. The other thing, going to kind of veer off course here for just a second, is if you'll look in this spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you, there's a shared Google Drive in here. If you open it up, there's a Lightspeed RPT file. This is something you can save to your desktop, and then you can come back into Lightspeed. You're going to go to all custom reports, and you're going to import that report right into here. But that report is a way for you to calculate what your fill rate is in your dealership. So what percentage of the time do we have parts in stock versus what percentage of the time do we have to order them? Once you've imported that report, you can go ahead and run it. It's going to ask you for the window of time. So here I've got 1/1 of this year versus the end of this year. And I've got a little filter in here that says, I only want to see parts to service. I can run this report. Any of you can run this report. And it's going to give you a couple of numbers on here. So these are going to be kind of hard to see. But there's a sale, CUC, which stands for charge unit count, which is just an incrementation in accounting terms. The number of times we special ordered something, and then the total number of times we had transactions on parts to service during that window. I can open my calculator right here. And if I take that 4156 and divide it by the 5809, then it's 71.5%. So what that's telling me is that in our dealership, 71.5% of the time when the service department needs something, we've got it in stock. So a good way to kind of measure your ability to meet the demands of your service department. And if you really want to look at it kind of broader, when you do your filters, you can ignore the service filter in here. And then it will give you all of those totals for all the different types of transactions that you do utilize in your store. So here we've got our setup, not installed. Those are both going to be to the service department. There's our parts to service. That's the one we looked at a second ago. We've got our wholesale transactions, our taxable over the counter, and then our farm use customers. So you can calculate your fill rate for all the different types of transactions that you do in your parts department. Again, that report is included on that spreadsheet that I'm going to share with y'all. So feel free to run it. We've actually had a couple of dealers that have kind of taken that a step further at this point in time. And when they're working with this report, I've kind of got the totals turned on, but you can run it with details. And then it'll show you all the individual transactions that are going into that math. And then I've got some dealers that drop this into Excel or Google Sheets, and then they're figuring out, hey, what are the top 100 parts that we're consistently having to order for the service department? What should we maybe do about putting those on force or min-max, or making sure that we do a better job of taking care of the guys in the service department? Any other questions? Take a break here before I lose my voice.
Yeah, I'll bring up one comment somebody made, and then maybe I'll ask you a question on that last thing you said. But Roxanne was wondering, you've mentioned a lot of great insights or development feature requests for Lightspeed. What is your success rate at getting those implemented? And maybe some of the thoughts I have, then I'll let you answer that too, to give you a second to get a drink. But I also have a lot of suggestions that I've thought of or think about on Lightspeed. And at the same time, I say those suggestions, but I definitely have a priority list of I'd much rather have certain things built than everything. Everything would be nice to have it all at once, but and so some of it is, I think Lightspeed's doing their best to try to prioritize that as well, to make it be the most impactful. What's urgent, what's impactful, in getting that to the dealers. And so some things, unfortunately, have to wait a little bit. And so I'll let you kind of respond to that. And then the second thing, with what you just said, where they took your report and expanded it to detail, how is that different from using the top selling parts report in Lightspeed that's available there?
Working backwards, the top selling parts report is only going to tell you about the parts that you sold. So it's I think the fill rate is a little bit different metric on that, because in the end, whether you order something or you sell it, it's always going to be sold. So it's always going to show up on there. But the fill rate report is going to kind of give you that idea about, here are the parts that we actually have to order before we fulfill.
Perfect.
On the first question, I'd say that when it comes to Lightspeed, I'm kind of a dreamer. And so there's 1,000 things that I've asked for. But I will say that I think I've got a pretty decent success rate on getting things done where I present a good case to Lightspeed that this is something that needs to happen. And I try to present those in a very constructive way. I'm a screenshot Nazi. So, when I want something, I kind of, here's exactly why I want it. And there's a lot of small things like, for me, when I come to run the buying guide here, one of the things that I've asked for a lot of times is, why do we have F&I categories in there where I'm never going to order parts for those items? That I've been asking about that for years. I've never got it done. I don't think they need to be there. But if you ask me, that's kind of just an annoyance to me. It's not really one of those things that I think really moves the needle. If you want to know the one that I fought for the longest and I'm probably most proudest of, and maybe not everybody thinks this way, but if we go into parts security and we go to parts invoice, where's the one about negative sales? There's one in there that about not being able to sell items that you don't have on hand.
Yeah, I think it's in that invoice section there, Mark, but
I thought it was. Sell more than available. So this one right here, that was me. I got so tired of our employees fat fingering things on the parts counter and selling items that, we didn't even have that part number in stock, and then it created a special order and we had to go back and fix it. I was the guy who fixed that a long time ago. That's probably the one I'm most proud of today.
Just while you're there, the other call out, overriding the special order minimum collection amount. That was a recent one. I was really excited when that one finally came in, because dealers stopped the system preference setting was stopping them from, it was making them get the deposit, but now having that option available, that's a good one.
So
on the override
on those new adds to security, because generally on a monthly basis, there's a change in security of some sort. And one of the things I think we've talked about in previous webinars, and I think particularly when it comes to reporting, is audit your permissions on occasion. And Mark is showing me a list of lots of different employees, but it can be a little bit tedious, but do go into your permissions periodically. And one of the things that you'll notice is if something's changed, notice on the screen here, the dark black checks. If there's something changed, generally that dark black check becomes kind of a gray check, and that's an indication that you have some permissions, but not all permissions. So it's kind of a teaser to say, look at me. And you go into that little T or tree that drops open, and you can see the checkbox that's missed or that's new, maybe something you hadn't thought of. To back to the two items that Brian and Mark had just mentioned, dealerships may not even know they're there to turn on the permission. So probably on a routine cadence, once a quarter, maybe once a month, I guess depends on the volume. Go in and just make sure that you have the proper permissions, and things that are new to the system, make sure you have access to them. So we've got a lot of really cool new things coming out over the last few months and coming up soon.
Or to circle back, Mark, Chris had a question. What's a good fill rate?
The best that I've ever seen was for essentially a single line BMW dealer, where the parts manager had been their service manager before, and so really understood it, and it was at 92%. I think for multi-line dealers, if you can get above about 78 to 80% to the service department, I think you're doing really good in the industry, because you're never going to have 100% of the parts. I mean, if you've got 100% of the parts in stock, your OBS is probably way out of control, because you shouldn't have body panels in stock for doing rec estimates and things like that. But I do like to, I don't think we'll have time to dig into it today. I can kind of show you the next generation of that fill rate report, where we created a Google Sheet that just shows all the items that we had to order four more times of, and then kind of going back and figuring out, hey, is this something that we need to stock? You've got some items like Kawasaki and Yamaha recall parts. You can't even order those for stock. You have to have a VIN number to order them. So you're never going to get to 100%. But I think if you're going to look at your fill rate for any one department, look at it for the service department. And that's why that report defaults to that. Because if your fill rate is low to the service department, then their efficiency and their productivity is going to be really poor as well. Kind of going back to
reminder on time. Got about 20 minutes. Probably go a little bit longer. I'm able to stay a little bit longer, but got about 20 minutes left as far as time on the webinar.
I might offer one more thought back to Lightspeed suggestions. So those of you that may not know that there is a support portal inside your DMS, there's a Get Help button at the top right corner of your Lightspeed screen.
That's where I'm going.
Yep, perfect. Go ahead and create an account there if you don't have one, and it's going to give you, and Mark's going to show you where you can go to make suggestions to the company. And we do review those on a daily basis, and we take them very seriously. I think a lot of folks just assume that we ignore them here and we don't care. We actually do care. But one of the things, I'll just throw out an example that causes some friction at times, is you may have 100 dealers that want a thing, and maybe it gets to the top of the priorities and gets added to the system. Well, there's 100 other people that don't want that. And so we kind of have to prioritize and decide what makes the most sense for the bulk of our customers, and we apply those accordingly. I'll give you an example. One of the things that I see a lot of friction about is adding freight while I'm receiving in the parts side. And back in the older versions of Lightspeed, you could add freight while you're receiving. You can't do that anymore. It's now on the accounts payable side. And in some dealerships love that, some dealerships hate that. But that was one of the things that we added to priorities, and decided the bulk of folks wanted it one way. But yeah, appreciate you showing this, Mark.
Just going back to the first question that you had there, though, Brian, about how do we get things done? I still use the idea exchange myself, but I will tell you what I do is that when I really want to get something over the finish line and I put it in the idea exchange, is I take this link and then I send it to my 20 group members, and I'm like, hey, everybody go log into the exchange and then like this, go in and click the little upvote on it. And so I'm trying to game the system a little bit and get some more votes on the items that I want to get moved. So
that's good. Good.
I will say from time to time, I've got access to about 300 dealerships, and we may have logged in.
May have
noted a few times.
we're gonna go ahead and take that out when we do the
Cut that section out of the recording, right?
That's
yeah.
right.
So kind of getting back to the parts ordering screen, and again, the buying guide is a process. It takes time, but you know what I do, we ran this buying guide for Indian, is that now as I work through this order, I'm going to start cleaning up one supplier at a time. And my stuff today, I think it's relatively clean, but you know, I'm just going through on this screen right here and I'm looking at, okay, this is the frame. I know it's a frame tube. We've sold it 3 times in a year. It's actually showing up on here because we got -1 on hand for whatever reason. And there's a few little gotchas that I'll give you. But if you're running the buying guide for a vendor and you have any negative on hand situations, then those items are going to populate in the screen. And that's going to be kind of your, hey, you need to work on this. You need to fix this. You need to clean this up for whatever reason, you know, figure out where the mistake happened and get that cleaned up. But this particular case, I'm not going to order that part. And so I'm just going to work down this list, and I'm not going to do it right now, but this is my process, is that I'm just going to scroll through this list and I'm going to say, okay, you know, I've sold 1 last year, 1 this year. I've got some notes in here about this part, not something that I need to stock, and I'm just going to delete it. And so, you know, I had 74 items that populated on my buying guide for Indian. In the end, I might only order 15 or 20 of these items, but it's a good, quick opportunity. And you learn over time, your eyes will kind of navigate to where they need to be on this screen, and you'll kind of learn how it works. But, you know, let's say that you come to like this part number that I left in here with an X after it. You know, this is an old part number that is not being used anymore. It happened in the transition between Polaris and Indian. And even though it's got similar part listings with it, or reference parts in this particular case, because we've got some different types of batteries that are connected, if I don't want to see this old part, I'm never going to order this part anymore. This might be one where I come in here and go ahead and set it force to 0. And so now the next time I run that buying guide, I'm not forced to look at that. If you're working with Parts Unlimited and you've got some old chest protectors that you sold a bunch of, but they're discontinued now and you can't get them anymore, set them on force to 0. That way, the next time you run the buying guide, you don't have to look at them anymore. But one of the things that I am doing is, as I go through these orders, you know, I've got these customer special orders that exist in the screen right here. These are really, really important to me. I'm not just building this PO and submitting this purchase order blindly. Every one of these parts, I'm going to go through and look at it. And here, this pedal brake, you know, I can see that we sold a couple of them last year. It's probably not to that 3 or 4 sales a year where I need to start stocking this item, but I'm going to look at it and I may go, you know what, I'm going to add some parts, add some notes to that part. Maybe I'm going to put it on force order so I can keep a closer eye on it. Or maybe I'm just going to let it sit. And when we sell a couple more of those, at that point in time, when we run the buying guide for Indian, it's going to start to populate on there. And then I'm going to make a decision about, is it something that I need to order, or is it something I don't want to look at anymore? So I'm always looking at every individual part on here and looking at what's my sales history, what do we have on hand? And then I get to this part right here. And again, the transition from Polaris to Indian, I can see right here that this part number has got the wrong sales category on it. So I'm just going to drop in and fix that real quick. And I'm going to do all of that before I place my PO. And so, you know, next time around, let's see if any of these parts have decent sales history. Let's see that, you know, that one had 4 sales on it, but it's kind of one of those items that we only sold 4 at one point in time. And I've got it set to force to 0 because it's a crankcase screw, something along those lines. It's not going to be something that we stock anymore. And I've got one more part down here that's under Polaris. So I'm going to go ahead and update that right here. Move to another line, and now that's saved. And so now when we receive this part going forward, my sales category for that part is going to be correct. Now, a couple of odd items that you may have pop up in this screen. And I talked about it once, is sometimes you get a part number in here and you don't see any history on it. Just go back and search, because that's probably a supersession issue and it's probably just the newest part number. There are some times where you'll see a part number that populates in this window and you look down and there's no sales history on it. And so you go and you look for supersessions and you don't find any. Tierney, do you know the other item that might cause an item to populate in the screen?
To populate on the ordering screen?
Yeah. If there's no sales history and there's no supersession,
I'm
lost
going to throw
sales.
lost sales. Good
Yeah.
call. Good call out.
So
You're right.
you won't see that anywhere else. You'd actually have to go back and look at in your detail history, look for lost sale transactions that exist in here under description. But if your employees are logging lost sales
Maybe
and
do this
you
too,
log,
Mark, is show how to create a lost sale.
I think we're going to run short on time. So
Okay. Well, it's on the
down to
parts
9.
invoice. So anybody who doesn't know where you can create a lost sale, it is on the parts invoice screen.
The one thing I will say is if you're going to utilize lost sales is give your parts employees some guidance on when to use that and when to not. Don't log a lost sale when somebody's just looking. They have to determine if we had this part, would the customer have truly bought it? To me, that's a lost sale. If somebody's just looking for something, that's not a lost sale. So got to be careful with that.
Good call.
I've kind of covered. I had a question that kind of came up when we were talking about this online about kit parts. And if we have kit parts that are set up, would those show up in here? The answer to that, at least in our testing, was no. So you have, where are the kit parts? You have these part kits that you can create in here, and you can add multiple different part numbers to it. So let's say that you've got a bumper that's comprised of a fair lead and a bumper and a couple of bolts. You could create that kit in here so you've kind of got it all in one place. But when you go to run the buying guide is going to give you the individual parts that you need to reorder when your history is hit enough, because theoretically you can't order the kit. So you've got to order the individual components for it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way they went. You're right. Absolutely right. So the reason I kind of went with that design was you want to track the individual history for the components within the kit and then apply the reorder points to it. And then if you send your artificially created kit part number to India, and they're going to look at you like, what the heck are you talking about? Right. So I think that's kind of the concept behind the rationalization. But good point.
I had this one came up on Saturday. I ordered 20 of these plugs from Western Power Sports. And when I placed the order, I found that they were on back order. And you can see our sales history on these is pretty strong. We really needed some more. I checked, Parts Unlimited had them in stock, but I didn't want to order those parts under the Parts Unlimited part number that's different than our WPS part number, because now I'm kind of skewing my sales history a little bit. What I did really quickly was I created a new PO for 20 of those parts. But I came down here and I changed the supplier to PU. And then you can't quite import that order into the into PU system, but I can when I go in here and look. Now I've got those spark plugs are under WPS part number, but they would go on a PU purchase order. And so that way, when they come in, even though they came from PU, we're going to receive them under the WPS part number. And now we're going to have all of our history is going to be under that one part number. We're not going to have some history under PU and some history under WPS. So I think with a lot of that kind of stuff, be it air filters, oil filters, if Bel-Ray oil, Maxima, chain wax, figure out, what vendor's part number is going to be your base part number, and either work off of that one all the time. So you just got sales history under one item, because occasionally, they're going to run out of it and you might have to go and get that from somebody else, but you don't want a bunch of jumbled sales history. Or if you do, if you're talking about ratio rights that you can get from Yamaha, PU, WPS, and at different times you've had all three of them, you may want to tie those items together with a similar part, but you say PU is going to be the one that we're going to order. That's going to be my base part number. And now the next time you run your buying guide for Parts Unlimited, you're going to see those ratio rights are going to show up under the PU number based on the sales history of all the other SKUs that you sold.
We're going to need to start stocking up on ratio rights with that new KX327 too, by the way. So
can't wait to get one. The other thing that I do, and I saved, I saved it in here in WP, was, and I do this with all the OEMs and even with the aftermarkets, the ones that we place orders with on a consistent basis, sometimes every day, is I keep what I call a filler part. And if you look at this tire right here, 180/55, we've sold 5 this year, but we have 1 in stock today. I could have placed this part in my WPS order that we did yesterday, but I kept it as a filler part. And that way, if somebody today places an order for a $20 item, then I can go ahead and add this filler item to that purchase order. And now I've got enough money to hit free freight. And I do that with the aftermarkets. I do that with the OEMs. You know, if there's Kawasaki Mule Pro Mule starters, that's an item we sell 3 or 4 of a month. But I typically have one of those starters is sitting in my Kawasaki orders, and I'll just put it under one of these little side order types that we've created. And so it just kind of sits down there at the bottom. And now all of a sudden, if I need to place a $150 order to get free freight, and I've got $30 or $40 worth of nuts and bolts from customers, then I'll just go down there, you know, change that to norm. And now I've got enough money to hit free freight for the manufacturer. And so now we can more consistently place orders, and we're spending less money on freight. So I've always got those fillers that are sitting in there. Other thing that I like to do as well is under purchase orders. If you go in and look, or actually not purchase orders, it's under suppliers. If we go in and look under suppliers, after the name, I'll typically add the free freight amount for each one of the vendors, because we've got so many that we work with and I can't always remember what those are. So I just add that in the name of that vendor. And so when I'm on the ordering screen and I go to look at PO, when I go to print the PO for them, I can preview it. And right here on the screen, it tells me what my free freight amount is. And so am I hitting free freight? Yep. I'm $3,000, $3,800. My free freight is $300. I know that I'm good. I don't have to go look it up on the manufacturer's website every time to make sure that I'm good. Other thing dealers need to do if you want to get the most out of your buying guide is to make sure that you clean up your old purchase orders. If you've got, you know, batteries that you ordered 4 years ago from WPS and they're still sitting out on the PO and you're never going to receive those, the system doesn't know if that PO is 1 day old or 1 year old or 1 decade old. It still sees that you have one on order. And so as you're running the buying guide, those old dead orders are going to skew what the buying guide is telling you to order. And it's pretty common. I'll go into a dealer and look at their old purchase orders. We'll go into receiving, go into PO. You know, I'll come in and I want to just scroll down to the bottom and I want to see what's old in here. And so, you know, here we've got something from 12/22, 2023. That part's never going to come in the history of kind. If this was a battery or something we wanted to stock, the system still thinks that we have one of those coming. So it's not going to tell me to order another one. So you've got to make sure that your old purchase orders are cleaned up. And for the most part, that kind of covers everything I had on my list. I did tell y'all, I'm just going to run through this real quick. So I'm going to give everybody a link to the spreadsheet here in a second. Again, you can just come in, file, make a copy. It's got the explanations of the reorder points. It's got the link to that custom parts fitment GPT. You're welcome to use it. There's a couple of other GPTs in here. Right now, CF Moto and Indian, you cannot build a PO in Lightspeed for them. What you can do is, like here for Indian, you know, I've got this purchase order with 71 items on it. I don't want to go into Indian site and type all those in. You can preview this PO. You can save that PO to your desktop. Not gonna do that. If we open up, all right, actually I want to get my Indian one here. You can just come into this GPT and upload that PO, and it will pretty quickly, it'll do the calculations, and then it'll generate a file that you can import onto the Indian site that works in place of the Lightspeed DCS until they get that fixed. And just saves you a lot of typing. I think it's kind of a big time saver. We're placing orders on a almost daily basis. But there's one of those for CF Moto and one for Indian. The fill rate link is on here, so you can download that report file for Lightspeed. The buying guide, kind of how the math works. There's instructions on how this sheet should work. And then I kind of talk about how the similar parts apply to the different ordering situations. So with that, for the most part, I think that I kind of hit everything. Where's my,
Perfect. A couple of things kind of hanging out in the chat. We'll go over a couple of questions maybe here. When you're dealing with ordering parts, there she is. What happens with parts that you order externally from Lightspeed? Does that information ever show up and be part of it? I think they're talking about if they did it on the manufacturer side, not in Lightspeed, are they going to miss that information?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of dealers, if you're a smaller dealer, you probably got more people doing things. But I think once you get bigger and you get to a size where systems really matter, is I think as a dealership, as a parts manager, you've got to say that, if we're going to do something, it's going to be through Lightspeed. Because as you get bigger, if you've got your parts people can just call a manufacturer and order parts, then one, you're probably not maximizing your free freight opportunities. But two, you've got items that are just showing up in the receiving area and nobody knows what the hell they're for. Nobody can track them. Nobody knows exactly what's going on. So I think that you've got to define who's going to place orders, but you've got a DMS, you're paying good money for it. It's got a lot of tools in there that are designed to help you to be profitable and to be efficient. I think that if you're just doing things on the manufacturer side and not doing them in Lightspeed, you're really kind of hurting yourself in the long run. I still there's a dealer not far from me, and this to this day still blows me away that they don't use the special order screen in Lightspeed invoicing. So every customer who comes in, if they want something that they don't have in stock, they run an invoice, they sell that part to the customer, even though they don't have it. The paper copy comes out of Lightspeed, they write on their special order, and then they put that in a file, and then they order those parts, they come in, and then they call the customer and say, hey, your part's here. The customer comes in, they go through the paper file, and they find it, and they give them the part. There's no record of the customer actually having picked it up. And it's kind of crazy to me that you're paying all this money for the system and not really getting any use out of it. I did, if y'all look in the chat, I just dropped in the link to that spreadsheet that I said I would share with everybody.
Perfect. Another question in here was, are you part of a 20 group today?
Or our dealership is? Yes, so we are still a member of our original Spider 20 group, but due to some external reasons, I don't personally participate in those anymore.
And then somebody also asked, what do you do for promos? Buy 3 batteries, get 1 free.
I recommend cost averaging. I think there's 2 things that you can do for those. You can cost average. So let's say that, they're $100 batteries. Typically, if you bought 4, that'd be $400. But you receive them. You can receive all 4 for $75. Some dealers will create a new part number, so they'll receive 3 at their regular part number, and then they'll have an alternate part number that might be, battery with an F at the end for free, and then they'll receive that 1 for free. I think the problem with that is that, and I've seen this before, if you have customers who are cost plus and you have employees who don't really have access to that or don't pay attention, if you've got something that's in the system for $0 and you've got a cost plus customer, you run an invoice through, cost plus 25 on 0 is still 0. So you're giving that stuff away. I would much rather cost average those items. Now, over time, you kind of, especially with fast moving parts, you kind of lose track of what your true cost is. But I think it's a better way. I think cost averaging is a better way than creating a second part that now is going to have different history. I'd rather have all of my history under that one part. The other thing, the other thing that you can do, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about this on the accounting side. I mean, you could theoretically, receive all 4 of them for $100 a piece, and then you could write on the PO slip, hey, we need to journal enter $100 back into parts discounts. You could do it on the accounting side as well.
You can track that discount in parts backing slips and AP and monitor it that way. Yeah, a lot of dealers do that.
Did you see anything else, Brian, that we missed out of the chat or Q&A?
I think we got most everything. There were some comments and suggestions, and for anybody that has suggestions on, we were talking about, moving things up the priority list at Lightspeed. Hopefully I shared my email with anybody who'd like to chat further on that. Also, we mentioned in the Get Help button inside the program where you can go and make suggestions, and we will look through those. But I think we've got everything else, unless you caught something, Mr. Lucas.
Yeah, last thing I saw was just, is there a default list of sales categories to use, which Lightspeed typically loads those for you when you go live. And there are some, somebody else asked, is there some type of a report that will display this is what the manufacturer calls as the category list, but in my Lightspeed it's different. And Lightspeed does have certain supplier settings that are required in order for things to work. It looks like Mark's finding something here for us, maybe.
Yeah, I had and by all means, I don't think anybody needs to use what we're using, but I will. Let me copy this real quick.
There are some
that.
training guides in that support portal, but not the list. I think that people are wanting, and it looks like you're maybe heading to a list here, Mark.
Yeah, what I was going to do is in that shared spreadsheet is I will give y'all. That's a list of what we use at Woods. I'd really there are some items that maybe probably need to be cleaned up because what did I just do?
Because they don't make 8-track players anymore.
Yeah, well, I just think that there are some items that are a little bit ambiguous. Is a jacket, is it casual or is it? There's just some items in there that's not super clear about exactly which one. I think they're kind of few and far between. I put some notes in there, but if you want, that's on that spreadsheet. Can't even speak anymore. It's on that shared spreadsheet, but that is a list of all the categories that we use. And then one other thing I will say is that if you go in and you look at suppliers let's just go back and look in Lightspeed. There is this option in here to use a price book category. And if we go and we look at the price books, change that to supplier. The manufacturers do have their own categories they use. I would tell you, I under no circumstances would ever enable this feature because the OEM categories, some of the manufacturers have hundreds of different ones that they use. And if you enable this, when you start selling those parts and they come out of the price book, your system will start creating hundreds of new sales categories for you that maybe aren't anything close to what you want to use. And BMW will be different from Kawasaki, and Kawasaki is different from Yamaha, and KTM has got hundreds of them as well. I would really kind of whittle down, going back to my list. I think mine's probably a little bit too long. I got 109 in there, but if you got down to 40 or 50 categories, I think that's probably the sweet spot to be at. And, kind of the nice thing is that once you get to that level, and Brian kind of alluded to this just a little bit. Let me see if I can find this real quick. We do this analysis of our parts, and by supplier, I can tell you what my inventory value is, what our 12-month sales are, what my turn ratio is. But because we have all those different sales categories, we also do the math on those as well. So how much inventory do I have in air filters? What have we sold over the last 12 months? What does our turn ratio look like? And once you start getting that list of defined categories, this information can be really powerful. Helmets is always kind of the one that I think surprises a lot of dealers. Dealers think that they make a lot of money on helmets, but then when they come in and take a look, they're like, wow, I had to stock a lot of helmets to really generate a small number of sales. And turn rates on helmets are usually pretty low. But that's the kind of information that you only learn once you start utilizing all those different sales categories.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. I'll maybe answer this last question and then we'll wrap it up for today. Will you go to a sales category screen for me?
In Lightspeed?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff Emick.
And just on that general tab when you pull one up. I'm gonna have to apologize to your cat later. She, wants you off, wants your time. But on here, so the category on usage types, there's those little check marks there. So Mark is asking the question, how do I prevent my parts people from using the wrong categories? The system is already designed for that. So if you have something selected as parts or maybe on service, when you're in your parts inventory screen, those are the ones that are going to show up in your drop-down menu to select as those categories. And you'll notice F&I and major unit sales, those categories cannot also be used in those other areas of the system. And vice versa, if you had something under major unit sales, you're not going to be able to also have that in parts or F&I the same. And so there's some system settings that are kind of protecting you from putting the wrong thing to the wrong part or labor item or unit item there. And so if you uncheck those now, they're all available, but that can cause some problems.
I recommend doing a couple of things in that case. Let's say that, hard parts Kimco, you're not a Kimco dealer anymore. You're not going to sell any of those parts. Once you created a sales category, it's there until the end of time. But let's say that we don't want to use it anymore. What I typically do on those is I'll come in, put a Z in front of the code, put a Z in front of the description. And so that moves these down to the very end of the list. And then as long as there are no parts that are currently tied to those items, we can go ahead and uncheck everything. And so at this point in time, not only is that category down at the very end of the list, but when you go into your parts inventory, if you went looking for that category, it doesn't even exist anymore because you've now told the system we can't use this anymore. So some cases you may have to, if you go to do that, the system might come back and tell you, hey, there's 5 or 6 parts that are still under that category. Those are pretty easy to find because you could just come in here and we could unclick all of our categories. And then let's say that we wanted to get rid of this HDZ category and we wanted to do something else. I could come in here, make sure that I don't have any active or inactive parts underneath that category. I could move them to whatever category I want to utilize. And then I could go back to sales categories and disable that whole one.
Perfect.
That's great.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, thank you so much for putting all of this together and sharing the documents that you did with the group. It was fun to see everybody clicking in and jumping in, live into that document. But we do have a couple of the next classes series that I think we got 3 lined up with the titles and things. We'll be sharing what we'll be doing when. But so watch out for that. We'll be sending an email to the group. You're already, if you registered for this event, you're already registered for all the subsequent events as a part of this series. If you're not seeing them on your calendar, make sure you reach out to me. I can help you get them added to your calendar. But from the invite email, there's a little link to actually get those added to your email. But Mark, thanks again for your time. Brian as well. It's always great to have you on and working through the questions with us here, for the group, and appreciate everybody else for joining.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and I would just say again that if you want to use the buying guide, just start out with one vendor at a time. Clean that vendor up, and then work on to the next one. If you try to do them all at once, that screen's going to be very, very overwhelming. And maybe don't start out with your bigger suppliers. Start out with a couple of your smaller OEMs, work through them, kind of get them cleaned up, and then typically aftermarket vendors, hardest ones to kind of get cleaned up initially. There's a lot of old garbage that's in there, but once you get them cleaned up, I still help our parts manager out on the weekends. And I'm running the buying guide for 10 vendors. And I run through that entire screen in under an hour, get everything cleaned up. And then it's just a matter of submitting the POs. And I feel like we maintain pretty decent fill rate. Not exactly where I'd like it to be, but we're always working to try to improve that. And everybody's got that spreadsheet. If there's anything else that you want on there, let me know. Be happy to add some more content to that.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Take care. Bye.